Hi everyone. Today I will be discussing escaping psychological prison. So first of all, what is psychological prison? Psychological prison is essentially our minds. When we are living in our heads, when we are in our thoughts, when we are living in a program, when we're living with a certain dogmatic belief system, we are in essence slaves to ourselves or slaves to our mind. So I want to talk about how people get stuck in psychological prison. So in childhood, when we are raised in a certain paradigm, essentially what's normalized for you, a certain belief, certain lifestyle, certain way of relating, this is set up by our parents. Our parents are the ones who identify how we should be. They tell us who we are until ultimately we can grow up and be our own person and live our own lives. Now, when we have this programming from childhood, unless we identify what those programs are, they are going to be cemented in the subconscious. And as a result, we're going to create our reality, which is mostly created from our subconscious mind. In fact, 95% of our consciousness is subconscious, and therefore most of what we do is out of our awareness. So unless we identify what our subconscious programming is, what our childhood programming is, and how it's affecting our reality and creating our reality, we are in essence stuck in childhood, stuck in those paradigms, and are slaves and are in prison to that way of being. So in childhood, when we're raised a certain way, we were treated a certain way, we download certain belief systems, certain emotional reactions, certain patterns, certain habits. What happens is that once we're an adult, this is already cemented, like I mentioned, and we are really helpless to the subconscious programming, to those paradigms that rule our life and create a primary part of our reality, most of our reality. So it's created in childhood, and then it's enforced by our culture, by our religions, by our society. So these programs are very difficult to get out of because we create our whole life around these very ways, these habits of thinking, of being, of believing, of seeing, of perceiving, and relating. So when you are living in this prison, you are kind of trauma bonded to the way of being. You may not even know that another way of being exists. So one of the first ways of escaping psychological prison is realizing that you exist inside of this prison and realizing that you've been held back. These beliefs are limiting. They're holding you back from growing, from reaching your full potential, for being your authentic self. And when you are in prison, you are essentially still a hostage of childhood. You're still in that hostage situation. You're still bonded to your parents or to their way of being, to their traditions, to their lifestyles, to their thoughts, and to their reactions. You're not present. You're most usually living in your head, and you are in essence stuck in the past or in the future. So because old habits die hard, it is very difficult to just paradigm shift out of these negative ways of being. It's very difficult because, again, we've created habits, we've gotten comfortable in these ways of being, and when you do leave, if you decide to shift paradigms, you're probably going to get judged or mocked or ridiculed or even just hurt or attacked perhaps by the people who are holding on to these belief systems and these paradigms for dear life, because again, they think that's safety. So if you're leaving and trying to shift paradigms and break down old belief systems, you're probably going to get either attacked, or you're certainly not going to be supported most of the time. And what this is it's a prison with no walls, and your own mind, because you're in it, it's hard to see how you're in this prison, in this false paradigm, in this subconscious mindset. And so, like I said, the first step is to identify that you are living in a prison, that you're in a program, that you're in a matrix, so to speak, and this matrix is bigger than you are. So this is why having a coach or a therapist or just a friend who can reflect back to you that you are in fact holding yourself back because you're living in these old ways of being, in these ways of relating that are simply not conducive to your success, then is the first step. This takes a great deal of humility, and oftentimes is seen like a breakdown, or is referred to as a breakdown breakthrough. What's happening is that the paradigm that you were living in is not sustainable anymore. The lies you believed in, like I'm not good enough or I'm not lovable, that you programmed to believe, that you were programmed to believe in childhood, the ways of relating, maybe reactive or highly defensive or defended, that way is not conducive to you anymore. So it takes some humility and acceptance to realize that I am trapped in this psychological prison. It's so important to identify the very quick feedback loop between your emotions, your thoughts, and therefore your beliefs, and then your actions. See, what happens is if we have a strong emotional reaction, we're going to immediately have a negative thought, or usually negative, sometimes positive. Most of the time it's negative, especially if there's a painful emotion. Immediately after, we have a negative emotion, and that negative emotion is going to, negative thought. And that negative thought, if thought enough, becomes a belief. So the prison that I'm talking about is a prison of your immediate emotions, then your reaction, your thoughts, and then therefore your beliefs, and then your habits of relating or acting. So this becomes a prison because it's not who you are. This is the way you were programmed. This is the way you had to be to survive. And the way you're surviving, if you're trying to thrive, you can't just decide one day, oh, I'm going to thrive. You have to paradigm shift. You have to break down the old way of being. So the first step is to notice the feedback loop and slow things down. This is what I refer to as non-reactivity, or being mindful, or just being aware of yourself. And notice this very quick feedback loop. You got to interrupt it. You have to understand you are not your programming. You are not your beliefs. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. You are the presence. This is Eckhart Tolle's whole idea of the power of now, is that you are you most in the present moment. So you're not your thoughts. You're not your beliefs. You're not these traditions that you were given by your parents. You're not the program. You're not the projection that your parents placed onto you or those around you, or your cultural conditioning. You are the presence of the present moment. So therefore you have to understand who you are. This is what we call self-awareness, right? So who are you? You are you in the present moment. You're not your subconscious programming. You want to identify your subconscious beliefs and understand we got to make them conscious. We got to become aware of what is the subconscious, because the subconscious is creating my reality. So when we make the subconscious conscious by becoming non-reactive and paying attention to those habitual reactions and thoughts, suddenly we become aware of the paradigm that we've been living in. And we can challenge it. We can face those core beliefs and dismantle the false ones. And then we can start to shift moment by moment, every thought, every pattern, every reaction, slowly but surely. Through habitual, continuous creating of new habits, we can ultimately create new ways of thinking, new ways of reacting, new ways of believing, perceiving, relating, one where we're much more non-reactive, much more peaceful, and much more aware of how we show up in the world. And essentially, you cannot get from a victim or a fear-based mindset or consciousness to an abundance thriver mindset linearly. You have to dismantle the old beliefs, patterns, relationship patterns, and way of perceiving the world. And at the core of it is just the false beliefs about yourself, about the world, about relating, about people, about relationships. You got to dismantle that and then shift. So you got to literally create a new reality with the new beliefs. And that takes time. That takes, ultimately, habits are hard to form. They're hard to break down. So it really is about habit forming. You created these ways of being out of habits of trying to survive. So now the new habits are going to be created from a consciousness of thriving, but we have to work. So ultimately, we oftentimes get pulled back into old paradigms, old ways of being, old relationship patterns, old defense mechanisms. But the more we get comfortable in the new way of being, the easier it'll become. And I want to finish off with one of my favorite quotes. This is from the Eagles, their song Already Gone. It goes like this. So oftentimes it happens that we live our lives in chains and we never even know we have the key. So each and every single one of us has the key to set ourselves free from this psychological prison of our childhood, of our false beliefs, of those things that we do, relationship patterns, behaviors, actions that we do that are self-sabotaging because they're not aligned with our higher self, they're not aligned with our true self, they're aligned with our childhood programming, and that's just ultimately keeping us stuck. So no one else can set you free, and no amount of soothing will soothe the pain of being trapped in a mental prison, a psychological prison. So in order to set your soul free, we got to get in touch with that core self, that authentic self in the present moment. I want to thank you all so very much for joining me for today's episode. Until next time, all the best.